Aloha, welcome back. This is another episode in the series that I wanted to start. I don't even know what I'm going to call it yet, but basically it's just feelings and things that maybe some people aren't able to talk about to other people, like family or friends and stuff. Just an open space to be able to let it all out on whatever topics come up. So last week was grief, and I know it was a little somber. So maybe this week we'll lighten it up a little bit on the topic of love. I know, gross. um, I This would be from my perspective, and maybe a little bit from my husband's perspective because my husband was actually my best friend, so we did talk, we did have conversations. But let me just rewind to the beginning. So when I was a little girl, I was kind of raised with princesses and fairy tales and, happily ever after and being able to find that one true love. And that was the ideal that I had, was this: I needed to find my prince, and I needed to be able to have true love's kiss and a happily ever after ending to my fairy tale story. And I guess as I got older, it kind of grew and grew. So I had this unrealistic expectation of, this is who I needed to find in the world. This is the person I needed to end up with. But the thing is, I'm also very antisocial. I don't like socializing with people. I don't like talking to people in any sense. Um, So I wasn't gonna go look for my true love. I kind of want to just that person to fall into my lap in a sense. Um, but I mean, I was friendly to people. If people talked to me, I would have conversations with them, but I was never one to initiate it. So I guess looking back at it, I don't know how I was supposed to find anybody if I don't even go and put myself out there for anybody or anything, really, any relationship. So I'm surprised I even had friends at all. But I had friends, which is, I guess, the start of understanding love in a different perspective, because all I knew was familial love, love from my family. I'm the youngest of six. So, I guess people would think that I would be the spoiled one and everybody just loves me, spoils me rotten. It, well, actually really wasn't the case, but that's a story for an entirely different day. Anyway, my parents, they showed me love in the best way that they could. I I loved watching them because they were a great example of what love is. My parents had been together from when they were about 19, 20, maybe. And even their love story was, to me, at a young age, hearing their love story was kind of like a fairy tale story in a sense to me, because they come from different backgrounds. My mom is the youngest of her family, so she's the baby. My dad is the first son in his family, so he's like the king in their family. So they already grew up differently. And then on top of that, my mom comes from Hawaiian homes. So, that's like, I guess for me, from my perspective, that's like ghetto-ish or ghetto adjacent. And then my dad grew up in Hawaii Kai, so he's like, rich-ish. But they went to school together, and so that's how initially they met. And you watch all those rom-coms where there's the jock and there's the pretty girl who isn't really into anything really. She doesn't do sports, she doesn't do arts or anything like that. But they're friends. But it seems kind of unlikely that they would be anything more than just friends. And hearing their perspective on what they saw back then. My dad saw, my mom was beautiful, and uh, he didn't really know how to approach her because she kind of felt standoffish, but everybody loved her. And then my mom's perspective was, everybody loved my dad. My dad was Mr. Aloha, social with everybody, and did everything. He was in glee, he was in all the sports, football, basketball, baseball. He did track. He did like all kinds of things, and he was very smart. So my dad was just a well-rounded person that was a social butterfly. And so my mom, I guess because she's not used to that kind of person, didn't really see my dad in the potential husband kind of category, or even potential boyfriend kind of category. But they ended up going to work at the same place after they graduated. They both went to, okay, first of which, I'm just going to say this. They went to go work for some random white man in Tennessee or Mississippi. First of which, that's crazy to me. At 18 years old, going off to who knows where, working for who knows who, is insane to me. But this is the 70s, so well, I don't know. It was a completely different world back then. Anyway, they go work for this guy, and they end up spending more time together with each other. And then my mom says that, she can see why people like him. She ends up wanting to be friends with him. And my dad, being the social guy that he is, opens up a little more to her, and they end up dating and living together. And I guess, seeing where that relationship would go. They were very open about what they wanted. They communicated well with each other, and they just let love bloom from there. It isn't until years later that I found out that there was a lot of back and forth between their parents and them. But, they loved each other enough to withstand whatever setbacks their parents were creating for them. And, you know, they've been married since 1978. It's well over 47 years now. They're going on 48. But, to me, I thought that was such a romantic and beautiful fairy tale esque story. And on top of all the other fairy tales that I would read, or all the Disney movies that I would watch, that's what I wanted. I wanted somebody to be able to love just almost instantly and be able to love for a very long time. But again, don't know how I'm going to do that if I don't like talking to people. So, I try to just have friendships with people because I don't know how to socialize. I don't know if you're flirting with me. I don't know what that means because I don't know anything different than just talking to a friend. So when I got to middle school, that's when everybody tries to be in a relationship. That's when everybody tries to have as many boyfriends and girlfriends as they can. Me, I don't know. I I can't read the cues. I don't know what that means. I also don't really see myself as cute or beautiful or anything, so I don't think that anybody's flirting with me, but apparently they are. But every guy that wanted to be my boyfriend, I don't know, I just thought that was just a title, like, "That's my boyfriend." That doesn't really mean anything to me. Um, yeah, I wouldn't say that I loved them when they would say, "Oh, I love you, babe." Okay. My response would just be like, "Thanks. Cool story, bro." But, you know, you don't know these things at 12, 13, 14 years old. And then by the time I got to 15, 16, I thought I knew better. I thought I wanted something more from somebody else, anybody else, really. Because, you know, at that age, you think you know love. You think you know that you've learned it enough at home that you can go out into the world and love other people. But my thing was, I'm not really the one that everybody pays the most attention to. I'm not really the one that everybody gives their love to at home. So for me, it was a different perspective. Like I want to have big love, like I thought I would at home. And so I guess I kind of put on rose colored glasses. Like I just want to see the good in everybody because I just want them to love me. Um, I would say, I did make some choices that probably weren't the best, but I wouldn't say I regretted any of the choices that I made because I don't know who told me, but somebody told me that our choices, our the choices that we make are lessons rather than mistakes, because a lesson you can learn from. A mistake, you have that negative connotation towards it where it's like the worst thing ever and it's so bad and there's no recovering from it. Whereas a lesson, it's hard, but you learn something from it. And then you can use what you learned for the next time this kind of issue occurs. And so my lesson resulted in my oldest, my firstborn. And that's another kind of love that I didn't even know I could feel until it happened. And my son is just, there's a lot that I learned from my son. I was 17, but I always knew I wanted to be a mom. I just didn't expect I would have been a mom at that age, but I knew I wanted to be one. And so when I had him, that was just like the greatest thing that ever happened to me ever in my life. And I poured so much into this little tiny, not really that tiny because he was actually large, but I poured a lot of love and attention and affection into this little being because, I had a lot of love to give. And now I have this little person that came from me to give it to. And, it was hard because the person that I had a child with was very young and immature. And so, I wanted to try to have that family to try and make or create love in that family situation. But it wasn't real. It was kind of like I was trying to artificially make this kind of family bond or artificially have love in this situationship. And then, I moved on from there because I still had love. I wasn't super heartbroken. I wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world because I can't have a family with this person because I had my son. He only knew love. And that was what I focused on, was just continuing to show him love and continuing to show him what real love actually looks like and feels like. And then I had my daughter, and I don't know how to describe it, but you know, y- I love all of my children very equally, but it having my daughter kind of expanded my view on that, which again, you don't think you understand the capacity of love that you can have. You think that, oh, this is it. This is as much love as I can give. But then I had my daughter, and it was even more than I had expected. And, in my mind, I'm complete. I have my boy, I have my girl. We're good. I don't need anything else. But, by the time my daughter was maybe about 2 going on 3 years old, I kind of contemplated. Now I'm 24 years old. I want to be able to settle down, but I don't want to settle. There's this thing that my grandma used to tell me from when I was 16, 17. She would always tell me, "Don't get married." And I would tell her, "Yep, cool. I won't, grandma. Promise." But she would always tell me that and follow it up with, "Because I know you're strong," or "Because I know you love hard." And so I know that she, in her way, was trying to protect me. She wanted to make sure that I didn't get hurt. She wanted me to be able to have a great love and not just have a husband. She wanted somebody to love me as much as I was going to love them. And, as corny as it sounds, I prayed for it. I don't know how else to come about it, because I don't have the skill set to socialize. I don't know where I'm supposed to position myself in the world to be able to find somebody like that. But I made a promise to myself that I wasn't just going to start dating. I wasn't just going to have a relationship just to have a relationship. In my mind, I was going to push for the end goal. My end goal was to be married, to raise a family with my husband, and to just have this love between us, and just us and our family. And my main goal, my main focus was just that. I didn't want to just have any boyfriend that would look my way. And so when I met my husband, he used to love telling everybody that when I met my wife, she was my boss. Like, you make it sound gross, but also you're older than me, so it's weird that you keep saying that. But anyway, I met my husband and we were friends, and I kept trying to tell myself that that's all I want. I just want to be friends with someone. And he ended up being like the best guy friend ever. I would talk to him for hours and hours. Sometime if we were working on the same shift, I would just talk to him during the shift. Or if we finished around the same time, either I would take him home or he would take me home, and we would just talk and talk and talk, and just about everything. I could talk about anything and everything under the sun with him, and I felt safe enough to be able to tell him anything. And, you know, th- I thought he was just the best friend that I could have. And I wasn't used to having guy friends. And so when he told me finally that he liked me, I kind of had to like second guess things, like, I'm sorry, but I just like you as a friend. In my face, he laughed it off. In my face, he was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, I get it. Cool, cool, cool." But years later, he told me, "Yeah, when you told me that, I was so mad. Like, I wanted to punch the steering wheel or something." And I was like, "Well, I don't know what to tell you. I only saw you as a friend." But I liked hanging out with him. If I had something happening at church, I invited him to come to church, and he wanted to. Or if there was something happening at my house, like a party or something, I invited him and he came over. Or like my grandparents died within 6 months of each other. And so my grandma passed away first. And then 6 months later, my grandpa passes away. And he came with me to my grandpa's funeral. Everybody kept asking, like, who is this guy? Why are you bringing him? Like, first of which, he's my friend. And he asked if he could come. So yeah, he can come. And every single time, everything he came with me to, everybody's like, "Oh, he's just your friend, huh?" Yes, he's just my friend. I don't see him any differently. But, you know, I as weird as it is to say, I got attached. There was someone at church that had asked me if we were together, and I was like, "No, he's just my friend." And then she asked me if she could talk to him, and I was like, "Oh, well, I mean, that's up to you." She goes, "Oh, well, can you invite him to this thing?" I said, "Yeah, he's coming anyway. He's coming with me." And then him, being him, he said he didn't see it as that person flirting with him because he didn't see her that way. And then I tried to remind him that's exactly what I was trying to tell you about you. But it is what it is. I guess, eventually my husband wore me down. But, I guess you don't see it. You don't recognize falling in love with your best friend as falling in love. Because for me, I not that I didn't want him to be the one, I wasn't sure if I was ready to fully commit to him being the one. But I will say, why not? Why not marry your best friend? Why not marry the one that you can confide everything and anything into? And so, my husband was my best friend who ended up being the love of my life. And it took me a very long while to figure that out, but he wore me down long enough for me to figure it out on my own. And although we were together for just under 9 years, just about 9 years, and married for just under 7 years, we had a very, I guess the best way to describe it is a beautiful mess of a life. We had a whirlwind of events and emotions and so many things that happened within that short amount of time. We weren't perfect, but we fit perfectly together. And, I guess for anybody who tries to create a checklist of what it is they need to look for, what it is they need to accomplish to be able to have a great love story or a great love life, I would just say that there isn't a checklist because love isn't a standard thing. There isn't a criteria to love because it's always growing and always moving and constantly progressing. So, I guess if anybody, not like I can give advice, and I am definitely not a therapist or anything, but I always suggest, like, even to family, that you don't necessarily have to go looking for love. You don't have to search in everyone and anyone to be that one because love always finds people. Love will always find you, and love will always find a way to be able to be, to exist. And so for me, I know I wanted that fairy tale love at first sight and true love's kiss and happily ever after. And then even my parents' love story. I wanted that kind of like instant and forever love. And when it came to my husband, in the beginning, there's that honeymoon phase where you just love just being around that person. And then after a while, it's like, yeah, I love you, but can you stop breathing down my neck? And then, you know, we had a conversation about having another baby, which would have been number 6 for us because when we got married, he had 3, I had 2, and having one more would have been our number 6. And I wanted to tell him like this is us. This is going to be us. And he wasn't sure if he was ready because he had just started mending things with the older 3 and he didn't want to take away from that. But I was trying to tell him, this baby can unify all of us. This baby will be the connection of all of our children and us. And he still wasn't sure until somebody else one of our one of his friends from church told him that the baby would be an expression of our love, the love that we feel for each other. And by him allowing me to have his baby, he would, I guess, he would expand our love between us. And then our love within our family, between our children, would grow even more. And then, we had him, and it was kind of hard, especially because he was born right before the shutdown, before the whole world shut down. And so when we were all shut in, I guess that was a test to everybody's life, everybody's ability to be able to parent, be stay at home parents, everybody's ability to be able to deal with their spouse 24/7. It was hard. My husband used to complain a lot because he was in the healthcare ish agency. He was a medical supplies delivery driver. And so he still kind of had to work during the pandemic, but my company that I was working for shut down. So I was at home with the kids. And, he would complain, like, how come I cannot be home with the family? And I would have to tell him, just be grateful you get to work because some people don't get to work. And of course, it's not what somebody wants to hear when they want to complain. So, we did get into a lot of arguments during that time. And especially because he wasn't used to not spending time with family. And I had to tell him, we have to be careful because we have a newborn. And with this virus that's going around, we don't know how it's going to affect him. And especially because there's no inoculations for it, there's no vaccine for this thing. So it's not like we can even protect ourselves. So I said, we just have to be very careful. And, the older 3, they just want to go hang out with their friends. Like, okay, that's fine, but I don't want my baby going out and hanging out with people I don't know. And, that, so the whole thing about the pandemic really tested our marriage because, for one, I had to deal with everything at home 24/7. And then I had to deal with my husband who would be so frustrated coming home from working. And then, he just wants to let the baby go hang out with the older 3 wherever they go. And I'm not okay with that because he's a newborn and, emotionally and mentally and hormonally, physically, everything, I'm not okay. So I'm trying to tell him, like, no, I don't feel okay with him going. And on top of that, he's a newborn. And he would say, well, that's his family too. I said, I understand those are his siblings, but the siblings are going with people not in our family. And so, there was a lot of back and forth about what it is he wanted versus what I wanted. And there was this conversation of, well, whose child is that? Is that just yours or is that our child? And so there had to be a lot of compromise during that time. But I will say it kind of felt like I was going through a lot of depression, like postpartum depression. It was very hard on me mentally and emotionally. And my husband, coming from the background that he comes from, he didn't understand that. He couldn't understand why I couldn't just get it. And no matter how much I tried to explain it to him, because he didn't get it, like it didn't exist to him. And so we had a lot of back and forth about that. There was a lot of strain between us, but we kind of had to go back to the basics of everything. Like, in case you forgot, we used to be friends. In case you forgot, we actually do love each other. In case you forgot, I'm actually not your enemy. I'm actually not your ex. I'm actually not this person that keeps trying to fight you. I'm the person that loves you. And I guess that time showed me how to love in a different way because I couldn't love in the way that I used to because I wasn't that same person anymore. I will say having my last one changed a lot for me mentally, emotionally. It changed me a lot. And I kind of had to tell him, I'm trying to be that person again that but I'm not there yet. And I need you to be patient with me. And so, we went through some things. We tried marriage counseling, which helped a bit. At first, he wasn't too sure he wanted to do it. The typical male mentality of I don't need therapy. But once we started doing it, it allowed us to be able to learn how to communicate differently because we were talking at each other rather than to each other. And once we figured that out, a little, we had a change and it was a little different way of communicating with each other. And so, then our love grew again. And again, to me, did not know that that could happen. And things changed again when my husband was diagnosed with leukemia. I couldn't understand, like, to me, I couldn't comprehend losing the love of my life. For me, I I'm the type of person where I need to have an answer for this problem. If there's a problem that happened, there's something along the lines that resulted in this. Like there has to be some kind of equation or some kind of event that happened that occurred that led to this occurrence. And I kept trying to look back at it like what happened? How could this have happened? And then furthermore, why is this happening? Like for me, I don't like wasted energy. And so if- I guess illogically, I was thinking to myself, why did we put in all this effort to better ourselves, to do better and to be better people? Why did we put in all this effort if my husband's just going to get this terminal illness? and possibly die. So I was frustrated for a bit, and then, I'm still trying to cling to this love that I built with my husband. We built this thing from the ground up, and now it's being threatened to be taken away. And then within actually prior to that, like 2 weeks prior to that, my son broke his leg. My firstborn broke his leg. And I'm thinking, what is going on? How come so many things are happening to my family? Why is it that the people I love the most, my children and my husband, are being affected right now? What is going on? And so I guess, I don't know if you know that saying of love and hate having a thin line between each other, but part of me was having all these hateful thoughts and feelings like, I am so angry right now. Why is this happening to the people that I love? And then some other issues happened between my son and my husband. And it was hard for me because I love both of them. And I don't know how to give up one or the other because I didn't want to give up my husband because, I loved him a lot and we put in so much to be together. And there was no chance that I was ever going to give up my son. There, I put in too much love and effort into raising him that there was absolutely no way my son was going anywhere. And so I guess that's the flip side to having love is it comes with a lot of ache. But, if you can shift your perspective, the ache doesn't hurt as much. And so, it was a very troubling time while my son was healing and while my husband was going through treatment. But, I figured I put myself aside, put my thoughts and feelings aside, and just love them. Just be there to love and support them. And so that's what we did. And things were just getting harder and harder. The treatments that my husband was going through was affecting him more than we had expected. And it started affecting his, I guess, the way that he processes things mentally. And he couldn't really think for himself. And when my husband gets like that, when he's confused or scared or anything like that, that's when he kind of lashes out because he's scared. And it's not really an excuse, but I recognize that. And so I ended up asking for more sessions with our marriage counselor. And then I had to find him his own therapist because, it was just starting to be a lot. And I told him, this is not a load I can carry on my own. And he couldn't get it. Like, he didn't understand how come I cannot just fix it. But, I loved him enough to just take it until we can get through this. And it took him a while to recognize what I was doing. But, sessions with our marriage counselor and sessions with his own therapist, he started realizing that my wife is trying. My wife does love me. And, we put in so much effort to reinforce our love. And again, coming from not wanting to talk to anybody and not knowing how to have any kind of relationship with anybody to now I know this man is the love of my life and I'm going to help him as much as I can. To now, it's been about 5.5 months since my husband passed. And I still have so much love for him. I still think about him all the time. Sometimes, you know, I know what his voice sounds like, so sometimes it sounds like he's still here. Sometimes I feel like I can still hear him. And to me, that's a testament of the love that we shared for the small amount of time that we had. And I just want to re edify that love will always find a way, but you don't have to spend your whole life trying to find it or trying to make it happen because it will happen. It's gonna happen. And I never thought that I could have felt a love as deep and as strong as I did with my husband, but it did. And I'm so thankful for that. And I hope that you all are able to experience that as well. And I guess that's it. I hope you all are able to